Hey, and welcome to the podcast where we talk about creating experimental art in trauma informed and sustainable ways that support artists, our communities, and our organization as a whole. I'm your host, Micah, and you're listening to Any Other Anythings. Sweet. Hi, welcome everybody on this lovely Wednesday. My name is Micah with Graybox Collective, and this is Any Other Anythings Season 2. We're super pumped to be back. I am here with Delia, and we are super excited to get the conversation rolling. Delia, how are you today? How are you feeling? What's on your mind? How's your heart?
Mm, I'm doing well this morning. I sort of rolled out of bed um, and was like, oh, I get to start my day off by having a lovely conversation. So that's wonderful. I'm looking forward to it.
Honestly, love that. And to be frank, I was the exact same way. Rolled out of bed this morning. We're both on the East Coast, so like it's definitely, not as early as the West Coast, obviously, but we know everyone is still in bed over there. So maybe a little bit jealous. But yeah, lovely to meet you. I know we haven't worked together. We both worked with Graybox, but haven't actually worked with each other directly. I am curious, like, how did you get connected with Graybox? And what has been your experience just in a bigger picture?
Yeah, so I really found out about what Bucks does first because I had Molly as a professor at ASU. Um, it was one of those like quarter semester classes. We didn't really get to chat, and she didn't really directly um, talk about what Gray Box was, but
Hmm.
I got to experience um, how she works in a trauma informed way through that class. And then as COVID was ramping up and things were happening inside, I found out about the trauma informed creative practices trainings that they were having, the virtual classes.
Hmm.
And so that's sort of what drew me in. I took all of those virtual sessions. And then when the last season opened up, I submitted the little Google Doc to join. And I haven't been able to participate in the work as deeply as I wanted to. This is going to be the season where I am a little bit more hands-on in a creative process.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Sweet. So, yeah, I know you mentioned I've always been really intrigued by Molly's, vision and idea behind creating a space for trauma-informed creative practices, which is, what you kind of brought up a little bit later there. Um, uh, that's such an interesting phrase to me, and I'm curious as to like what your thoughts on like what does trauma-informed creative practice actually mean? Like how do you conceptualize that? How do you understand what that process is, and what the practice is for you?
I feel like trauma-informed creative practices involves um, one, it's being in a space in which the way that you make the work is essential to the outcome of the work. I think we're always in that space, but it's um, that dichotomy is recognized and really intentional. Um, I come from primarily a dance background, and there are a lot of times in dance creative processes, at the very least, where no, I think this has happened in my theater experiences too, where you're asked to sort of dig up really personal experiences as a way to connect with a theme or a character, but then there isn't necessarily that care enforced in that in that process where you you just sort of you dig out these deep painful things for the sake of the art, and then you just have to deal with it afterwards. So I feel like
Hmm.
engaging in trauma informed creative practices is one. um, if you are creating really personal painful work, then it's setting yourself up to not not just open the wound, but then close the wound and be in the most sterile environment possible. Or it also gives permission for everyone to show up in a space where they're at for that day,
Hmm.
rather than this leave everything at the door um, type of mentality.
Yeah, yeah. That's really cool. I do love that. And there is something about I think that's been a conversation, especially throughout COVID, that's becoming more and more prevalent. Just the idea that it's really a uh like, to what degree do we make art at the expense of the artist, right? And exactly what you said, when we have something like this, like Gray Box Collective, a group that does trauma informed creative works, uh, obviously, when we're going through these processes, it's not whatever it takes for the show must go on, right? It's more so, um, we realize the damages that have been done. We realize that we all have our own struggles, and yeah, there really is a sort of meeting in the middle, a kind of understanding as far as a mutual understanding between all of the creative team as well as our collective audience. That it's okay if things aren't perfect. It's okay if things are messy, because that's how life is. It's imperfect, it's messy. So I really love that point of view. I am curious. I know you spoke on the fact that you've done a few workshops with Molly, and obviously that Molly was also your instructor. I am curious, like, how was that experience? Because I know a lot of the Gray Box team has been very involved with Molly in a performance way or as a director, but I'm curious as to how your experience was with her in an educational setting primarily so far.
Well, I think that um, I would say that the scope of that particular class, the college class, was necessarily, it was more of make sure these people who are about to graduate have a plan for what their final project will be. I guess it makes sense to me that that would be a role that Molly would be in, because it's less of I have this knowledge and I'm telling you what to do with it. And it was more um, of Molly creating the container for us to investigate what our own needs were
Hmm.
for this project that we were developing. And then in terms of the virtual training sessions, that was taught by Molly, Chris, and Sarah. I've worked with Sarah more than anybody, but for some reason I forgot. So
All good.
yeah, so the virtual training sessions with Molly, Chris, and Sarah were interesting because the content was coming in what was being shared, but it was also being coming in the way that it was being shared.
Mm,
So it allowed you or the participants to engage on multiple levels, sort of um, the experience of how the space was set up, what steps we went through. There was that very clear, we're all going to check in, we're going to do some kind of grounding activity, body activity. There's this sort of warm up experience. There are opportunities to reflect throughout. So that structure was discussed as the the learning objectives, but also upheld in the very way that they structured the time. And that was really exciting because it just, yeah, it allowed a lot of different ways to get into the work.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Yeah, funny enough, I was just about to ask, speaking of check-ins, that's something that I really do appreciate as well. Again, really going back to the idea of meeting somewhere where they're at. I am doing this all out of order, but you know what? We live in the draft. So I would love to just do a quick check-in with you. I know we kind of did a quick touch-in at the very beginning, but yeah, if I guess we're gonna make this a two-prong question. We'll say, is there a favorite check-in that you've experienced, whether it's within Graybox Collective or with your experiences alongside Molly, or just in life that you've experienced? If there's a check-in that you really do enjoy, or just something that really grounds you or warms you up whenever you're entering a creative space, uh, is there one that you really enjoy? And if so, we'll use that warm-up, check-in, grounding activity just as sort of our check-in with one another as we continue to chat here.
Gray box check-in that I've experienced has been, are there any need to knows or care to shares? I
Mm,
do like that phrasing because um, it's not asking you to give any more than information than you're willing to, which can be nice sometimes for that permission. But this morning I'm thinking about a check-in that I have done in another artistic group called Breaking Pachanga, where we would always start with what what is something you need today and what is something you can offer. Um, and it's always cool to see how naturally sometimes people's needs and offerings line up and help us to come into the space with a sense of reciprocity.
yeah, yeah, I love that. I really resonate with the idea of offering something, especially in a creative space. There's it's sometimes a pretty delicate balance sometimes when you're being directed or coached or whatever in a creative space, especially where sometimes it does feel like if you try something and then maybe someone else in the space wants to try something else, there's I don't know, there's these preconceived notions of like, oh, okay, great, we tried that, now can we try this, to like there I feel like for me there's always been some weird connotation of like, oh yeah, that wasn't good enough, so let's try something else. But I think the verbiage and the idea of making an offer instead of just like, hey, here's something to give with no repercussions, like take it or leave it,
Mhm.
is sort of the idea that an offering really has. It's really gracious. I feel like that's been a phrase in the creative space that I've been hearing more and more of lately, that I really do appreciate and love. And I think there is something really kind of caring and endearing about that. So yeah, let's do the check-in. I guess I'll kick off. Uh, so wait, okay. Do we prefer the need to knows and oh my goodness, what's the other part?
Care to shares?
Care to shares, my goodness. I should know this too. Brain fart, early mornings, it's okay. Um, do we prefer that one or do we prefer the second one that you mentioned here?
um, it sounded like you resonated with the need and offering. I'm going to do that one this morning to switch things up.
Sweet. Okay. All right. I'm good for that. So, yes, what do I need? I feel like in this moment, I think I need to slow down. I have been going really nonstop for a very long time, and it is starting to wear on me. And there's been a lot of things in my life that have been happening. Had some family losses, and some of our other
Mhm.
creative team, and I have been working 3+ jobs for the last almost year now. And I love
Mhm.
each and every one of these roles. But I'm definitely feeling the strain. and I think it's time to let something go. And I've been saying that for a couple months now. So I do need to slow down, I think, and really actually, because I feel like one of my bigger regrets was not being able to visit my family um, when before that family member passed back in July, which is when I had
Mm.
an opportunity to, because the rest of my family was going to see it, but I was so busy and I was so caught up in life that I didn't allow myself the opportunity to, uh, engage in that way. So that's been kind of sitting on me. But then, as far as what I can offer in this moment, um, is honestly peace of mind. I don't know why. Maybe it's the morning time. Maybe it's how lovely this conversation is so far. But I really do believe one thing I feel like my family is good at, as well as I guess has been passed down on to me, is taking these things with strides, and having peace with what's happened. I realize that death is a natural part of life, and there are, as much as it sucks, you know, the way that my family sees it, and myself included, is like we know she died peacefully in their sleep, so like that was a good thing. And then the other half is um I think in that peace, knowing that it was peaceful for my family, we also found peace in the comfort of one another when we got to see each other. And now coming into a creative space, which is my primary function in this world as of now, I find peace in this and in you know my life experience as a creative. So I think that that's one thing that I try to resonate and kind of share pretty frequently. So if you're stressed, I love helping calm down. If you're already calm, then we'll stay in a peaceful place and a peaceful mind. So I guess that's what I like, and that's what I have to offer. Sweet, yeah. I'll kick it off to you. That was so long-winded.
Thank you so much for sharing about where you're at, because, you did share a little bit about that in our previous emails, but everybody has a super different process with
Mm,
loss. And so, yeah, I definitely had a very intimate and tenuous path with loss over the past several months. So
mm.
it's it's funny because I think I'm thinking a lot about what my answer will be, and how to how to word the phrase that I don't want to overthink my what my responses in this conversation. Um, yeah, something along the lines of offering, like you said before, we exist in draft, so allowing my thoughts to come out um, in draft and not fully realized. Um, feels like my needs are pretty much being met right now. So just sitting in that investigation of if those things shift. And
No, I love that. It's always so interesting where we can be in a moment where you don't have a need in the moment. Like maybe there are desires, maybe there are wants, but for the time being, all our needs are met. And I love that. I love that mentality, that thought, that's a space that we can exist in. So that was really cool to hear as well. And thank you for receiving what I what I shared with such grace. Sweet, sweet. So yeah, I just had a couple more things I wanted to kind of chat on and think on. Um, the next thing I wanted to kind of, I guess, explore is as an artist yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said you went to study dance, right? That's your background, and what are you currently pursuing that for a living as well?
so my degree is in performance and movement
Hmm.
because I didn't want to. So uh, I exist in a very multidisciplinary performancey way.
Mm,
I also write and paint. Like, I try to create sort of installations and interactive experiences.
that's awesome. I love that. I love that. So with that, because especially being in a multidisciplinary, artistic lifestyle. I am curious, like, what does sustaining yourself as an artist look like for you? What does that process look like? Is it draining being in a multidisciplinary? Does it feel more freeing because you have more, mediums to explore? How is that process for you sustaining your artistic practices?
I I would say that in terms of like a financial way, I primarily sustain myself as an arts administrator.
Mm,
So I do grant management. I'm a rehearsal assistant for Suffolk Dance Theater. I so a lot of my time. Oh, and then also I should probably say this. Where I live in Virginia in
mhm,
a rural community, but my I live in this family space. It's like an art center. My dad has his gallery full of paintings, and my mother is an author and has her books here. And so I also am sort of doing the administration and program coordination for our place here. So we're having open studios. Uh, I'm trying to start a residency program. So I say that because I think my creativity comes through as an administrator as well, but a lot
mm,
of my time is being focused on how I can create sustainable experiences for other artists. And it's really easy for me to get so focused on creating these opportunities for others that I'm not necessarily putting the time and energy into creating my own work. I think
mm,
that as I have shifted back into this space in Virginia has kind of changed where I'm still doing that administrative work and also setting really firm boundaries with myself of how much
mm.
time I dedicate to that so that I'm still in creative process. So that's part of why um, I'm trying to be a lot more present in this season with the digital work development at Graybox, so that I'm not allowing myself to push that aside for the things that I'm doing for other people.
Yeah, yeah. That's honestly so interesting. Reflecting, sometimes feel like I find myself in a similar position where, to sustain yourself, part of the experience is helping create a sustainable space for other artists. And the opportunities that we might be providing are sometimes close, if not exactly what we would like to be doing. So that's so interesting to hear you say that because I find myself as well as an artistic administrator for one of my jobs, and that's something that I've really found joy in because this is one of the first times that I've been able to do that in a consistent manner. All of my other previous arts admin type jobs have really been helping have been like for children's theater or helping train or education, that sort of thing within the arts, versus my current role, and sounds like what you're doing as well, to sustain, is really more focused on, hey, let's create opportunities for artists to create their work, to get it out there, to express that that their creative processes and influences, and share it with the rest of the world, which is such a cool. It's really a beautiful experience to be a part of. But you're right, there is a part of us that's like, okay, where's the balance of providing these opportunities for others, so much so to the extent that there's no longer time or energy being put back into ourselves. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, we really do, there is really something to being poured back into after you've been pouring into others for X amount of time, and that doesn't have a set limit to it by any means. Everyone has their own capacity that they can give or take, and I don't think there's any shame in how much there is being offered or how much there is being needed in any given capacity. So, yeah, that's such an interesting perspective. I thank you for that. Um, so, kind of in a similar thread of thought, I was just curious, when you are balancing being an artist versus, let's say, the rest of your life, I don't know if you feel like you have a separation from uh, your artistic self, whether it's how you express yourself, whether it's in the working world of art, or anything of the like, versus maybe how you are around your family or just in other aspects of your life. Do you feel like there is a balance that you have to find there? Do you feel like you have to separate those parts of yourselves, or do you kind of feel like everything's really merged and is all just one, you know,
Mm.
big blob of an experience together?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a clear line
Mm,
between my artistic self and my other self. I'm sure that that has a lot to do with the fact that um, I'm in an artistic family.
mm,
So when I am engaging with my family, it's, um, it is, there's comfort with that kind of uh, messy, like, um, yeah, there's comfort in
mm,
the fact that we're all artists and we do engage with the concept of art, all three of us, in very different ways. So I think that is the balance that has to happen is fi- figuring out how I can engage in creation as myself versus when I'm doing so in a way that's impacting our family's projects as a whole. And I think that maybe not a separation, but like a balance thing that I have to work through is when there are creative tasks that aren't necessarily part of my artistic practice,
mm.
um, and, like giving them space, but also not holding them to the same rigorous standards.
Yeah, yeah.
What I'm specifically saying is like I I enjoy crocheting as a way to just sort of um, get my hands moving myself. It keeps me from picking up my phone and scrolling for hours. And, um, I think I've had a phase where I was like, oh, if I'm doing this, then I have to go all in and I have to make stuff to sell. And um, no, I don't have to do that. I can have this thing that is creating something, but I don't have to market the product. I can just enjoy
Mm.
the experience of it. And then I can have my other creative outlets, which are part of my professional body of work, let's say.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah.
yeah. That's honestly, I love that. It's always really lovely to see. I mean, obviously we attach to things that we find similar with one another, and like that excites us because we're like, oh, we're not alone. Um, but I really do like that, like having art and creative processes that are for you, versus what you do professionally, because it's still work at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, work can be draining. And there is a balance that needs to be even within our art, not just with the art and the rest of our life, but just within the artistic practices themselves. Yeah, I feel like one thing that I've neglected myself, that you kind of reminded me of, is I know, so music has been a part of my life as long as I can remember. It's a very personal thing for me. Like it's just been so present in my life, and I really appreciate, what you said, because one thing that I did kind of keep for myself is I do write music, and I love writing music and creating, songs and all that good stuff. And I have like my little long notebook of all these songs that I've written, and I've got my little guitar and my piano that I pluck along, every once in a while, just creating new stuff. And it's been a very long time since I've done that, to be honest. A lot of my artistic experience has been work, which is not bad. Like we still enjoy it, we still really do. Uh, it's still a lovely process, and it's something that I don't ever regret or feel bad about. But there really is something to be said about, not having to distribute and, promote and, have to put on a show of whatever it is that's being produced artistically in your world, and just having something that is personal, private, um, creation for the sake of creation, experiencing art for the sake of experiencing art, that really does kind of refuel you almost, and kind of takes the pressure off of, being perfect. It gives you a space to live in the draft, like we've been saying. And I really do love that. So yeah, thank you for that, gentle reminder, even though it was probably inadvertent. So yeah, great. Um, Sweet. So that honestly was what I wanted to chat about today. This was honestly so great to get to know you more and to meet you. I did want to just kind of open the space back up and see if there are any closing thoughts, or, anythings that you had, before we wrap up.
Well, I I just want to touch on one uh, gray box experience that I've had that I don't
Mm,
think I mentioned, and I believe you also participated in, but we were like satelliting each other. I don't think we actually interacted very much, but
sure.
was the Play in the Gray workshop
Yeah.
series. That
Hmm.
was really um, an exciting opportunity. I I got to lead workshops because of that experience,
Mm,
that I had been really, really wanting to. I know what no one was interested in it. I was like, I want to teach this. I want to or facilitate this experience where we're looking at relationships between different plants or organisms in nature, and then
yeah.
we're reflecting them in our bodies. Um, and so I think Playing the Gray was a cool opportunity to, um, yeah, to just practice something and to facilitate this space in a way that I hadn't had the opportunity to. And because it was virtual, I had a family member from Bogota, Colombia, like tune in. So I just think that was a really cool experience that I wanted to uplift as like highlight so far of my gray box experience.
I love that. That is right. Yeah, playing the grave. My goodness, that was such a unique experience. Because that was the first, yeah, man, that was the first COVID project that was kind of put together within the Grey Box Collective. And yeah, that was such a unique experience. Because that was the first time, I don't know about you, but that was the first time that I had ever tried to do anything sort of like a digital creation, as far as, crossing live art and digital performance. Yeah, I don't know. Have you done anything similar prior to that whole Playing the Gray experience?
My sort that project that I, I did because of Molly's class
Hmm.
wasn't intended to be a virtual performance, but
Mm,
circumstances made it have to be that.
yeah.
But that was actually, I don't know. I think that virtual spaces, something that they really offer is that you people who are not geographically close to you can still interact with you.
Mm,
Um, so that was, yeah, my
yeah.
my grandma was able to see it, so I think that that's really helpful.
Yeah. There is really something cool about being able to kind of bridge that gap. I think I know I've tried to do recorded arts. I went to film school for a little bit, and I have dabbled in other mediums of recorded arts. But I've always had just an affinity for the live arts. There's just something about it.
Hmm.
But there's also something to really be said about exactly what you said, being able to share that with folks who may not otherwise have the capacity or accessibility to engage with art otherwise. So being able to like open it up even just a little bit further, even if it's just for one or two projects, or because of a given
Hmm.
circumstance, I really think that goes a long way. Which is, I mean, honestly, I feel like in part might have been what kind of inspired even this series of podcasts and interviews. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. Um, great, great. Any other anythings?
Um, no, I really enjoyed being in conversation with you. I'm glad that this particular podcast allowed us to actually have a conversation instead of, um, it's funny. I think that's part of also this hybrid way of existing is that some
Mm,
of us are in, we're in the same thing, but we're not necessarily having that same opportunity to develop relationships. So,
yeah,
yeah, I just enjoyed starting my day with a conversation with you.
that's awesome. Well, the feeling is 100% mutual. This has been a pleasure. And I'm, yeah, so excited to see what comes next, especially with this next digital project that we will both be working on. So I'm super pumped for it. Yeah. Well, as always, it's been lovely. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, we'll see everyone else on the next episode. Take care.
Hey, listeners, thank you so much for taking the time and energy to listen to this episode of Any Other Anything. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to find out more about the podcast, the speakers, and Graybox Collective. You can also go to grayboxcollective.com/podcast for a full transcript of this episode. Again, thanks so much for listening and take care of yourselves. Peace.